Part 1. The first meeting. The space station of Varan Prime was always busy. But on this day, it felt like the entire galaxy had gathered under its shining domes. Merchants shouted prices in strange languages, guards scanned crowds for trouble, and ships came and went in endless streams. Ethan Cole, a human cargo pilot, walked through the docking bay with his bag slung over his shoulder. He had just delivered a shipment of food packs and was thinking about grabbing a quiet drink before heading back to his ship. He had no idea that in the next few minutes, his life would change forever. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a small figure standing on a cargo crate. She wasn't human, but she wasn't like the big, bulky alien species Ethan usually saw. She was short, chest-high to him, with lean muscles, sharp fangs peeking from her lips, and glowing amber eyes that scanned the crowd like a predator. Her black hair was tied back, revealing pointed ears and strange silver markings along her skin. She wore light armor with a blade strapped to her back, the kind of weapon that looked old but deadly. Ethan was about to walk past when her gaze locked on him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Then, her lips curved into a smirk. "Well," she said in a voice both smooth and dangerous, "I thought humans were bigger." Her eyes flicked up and down, making it very clear she was talking about his size, and not just his height. Ethan blinked, taken aback by the bluntness. But instead of getting angry, he chuckled. "Guess you've only met the wrong kind of human," he replied calmly. Her smirk widened, clearly amused that he didn't flinch or snap back. Most men, she knew, would have either puffed up their chest or walked away embarrassed. But this one stood his ground with a calm, steady look. Before she could answer, the station's alarm blared. A deep siren echoed through the docking bay, followed by a robotic voice. "Warning, hull breach detected. All personnel to emergency shelters." The crowd erupted into panic. Aliens of all shapes rushing for safety through the glass walls of the bay. Ethan saw a smaller ship crash into the station's outer ring. Sparks and fire spilling into space. A wave of explosions rattled the ground, and pieces of metal fell from above. Ethan turned to run for the shelter when a loud crash behind him made him spin around. The tiny alien warrior had been thrown off the crate by the blast. Her leg caught under a heavy supply container. She struggled to push it off, but it was too heavy. Without thinking, Ethan ran to her side, grabbed the edge, and heaved the container away. She looked at him in surprise. Most strangers wouldn't risk themselves in a crisis. Another explosion shook the bay, and the air was starting to thin. Ethan grabbed her wrist. "Come on, we have to get to the escape pods," he said. She hesitated for just a second. Varelian warriors didn't like being pulled or ordered around, but followed. The escape pods were already filling up, and a group of panicked civilians pushed past them, sealing one of the pods shut. Only one was left, half damaged, and the warning light above it flashed red. "It's this or nothing," Ethan muttered, pulling the hatch open. They jumped inside, and the door slammed shut. The pod launched into space with a hard jolt, throwing them against the seats. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke, just breathing hard as the pod shook from the explosions outside. Finally, she tilted her head toward him, still catching her breath. "You know," she said with that same sly tone, "if we die out here, at least I'll know you weren't as slow as you look." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And if we survive?" Her amber eyes glowed faintly in the dim pod light. "Then I'll see if you're really big enough to last," she whispered, her voice carrying both mockery and something like curiosity. Outside the small window, the massive station grew smaller, a burning ring fading into the endless black of space. Inside the pod, only the hum of failing systems and the sound of their breathing filled the silence. Neither of them knew where they were going or if rescue would come, but one thing was certain: this strange, sharp-tongued alien warrior was not going to make things boring. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like maybe he didn't want the quiet life after all. The escape pod drifted silently through the endless dark. Faint sparks flickered from one of the panels, and the small navigation screen showed nothing but static. Ethan leaned over the controls, trying to coax life back into them. But the pod's systems were failing faster than he expected. Behind him, the tiny alien warrior sat with her arms crossed, watching him with those glowing amber eyes. "You're wasting time," she said finally, her tone sharp. "The oxygen reserve is down to 47 hours, and without propulsion, we'll just float until we run out of air." Ethan didn't look up. "You got a better idea?" Her lips curved into a smirk. "Yes, but you wouldn't survive it." He glanced at her, narrowing his eyes. "Try me." She leaned forward slightly, the dim light catching the silver markings along her skin. "My people, the Varelians, are trained to live on almost no oxygen. We can slow our heartbeat, control our breathing, even put ourselves into a half-sleep to last for days," she said. "But you," she added, her gaze sweeping over him. "Humans breathe like frightened animals, fast and wasteful." Ethan gave a small chuckle. "I'll try not to suffocate too quickly then." Her eyes narrowed. Clearly annoyed, he didn't seem intimidated. Most who met her didn't dare talk back, especially not humans. But this one, there was something different about him. The pod jolted suddenly, throwing them both against their seats. Ethan grabbed the armrest. "What was that?" She checked a flickering display. "Something just latched onto us." "Something big." They both froze, listening. A dull thud echoed through the pod, followed by the sound of claws scraping against the hull. Ethan reached for the emergency locker and pulled out a short-range blaster. Zira gave him a sideways glance. "That's cute, but I'll handle it." Before he could reply, the hatch shuddered as something tried to force its way in. Without hesitation, Zira drew the blade from her back, a weapon that glimmered faintly with an energy pulse. When the hatch finally burst open, a foul-smelling alien creature lunged. Inside, long limbs, rows of sharp teeth, and eyes glowing sickly green, it hissed and went straight for Ethan. But Zira moved like lightning. She ducked under its swing, slashed across its chest, and in one fluid motion, stabbed upward into its throat. The creature convulsed and collapsed at their feet, its dark blood pooling on the floor. Ethan exhaled slowly, lowering the blaster. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." Zira wiped her blade on the creature's hide and gave him a small grin. Too late for that. They managed to shove the dead creature out into space, sealing the hatch again. The pod was quiet once more, except for the faint hum of life support. Ethan checked the oxygen gauge, still ticking down. 2 days, he murmured. Zira tilted her head. "Then we find help before then." Hours passed in uneasy silence. Ethan worked on rerouting power from the damaged navigation system to the comms. Zira sat near the viewport, watching distant stars drift past. Every now and then, she would glance at him, as if measuring him. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why did you save me back on the station?" Ethan didn't stop working. "Because you were trapped." "That's not a reason," she pressed. "Most would have left me. I'm not your kind. I'm not part of your crew. Why risk yourself?" He met her gaze. "Because I could." For a moment, she said nothing, but there was a flicker in her eyes. Something softer than before. A faint beeping interrupted the moment. The comm panel lit up with a weak signal. "It's either a rescue ship," Ethan said, "or trouble." Zira leaned in close, scanning the faint readings. "Could be a salvage vessel." "Or pirates." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Pirates?" Her lips twitched. "If it is, I'll kill them before they touch you." The signal grew stronger, and the outline of a small ship appeared on the viewport. It was approaching fast. Ethan felt a twinge of unease. "Doesn't look like a rescue ship." Zira's hand rested on her blade, her voice calm but sharp. "Then it's trouble." The approaching vessel sent out a docking latch, locking onto their pod. The lights inside flickered as power surged through the connection. Ethan stood ready with his blaster. Zira beside him with her weapon drawn. The hatch lock began to turn slowly, the metallic click echoing through the pod. "Ready?" Ethan whispered. Zira smirked. Always. The hatch opened, revealing 3 tall, armored figures with weapons. Their leader stepped forward, his voice deep and mocking. "Looks like we found ourselves some easy prey." Zira's amber eyes narrowed, her voice a low growl. "Come and try." The 3 pirates stepped into the cramped escape pod, their boots thudding against the metal floor. The leader, a tall alien with scaled skin and a breathing mask, eyed Ethan and Zira like they were already loot to be claimed. 2 survivors. "In a dead pod," he said in a deep, gloating voice. "Easy credits." Ethan raised his blaster, but the leader barely looked at it. "Put that toy down, human," he sneered. "You don't want to make me angry." Before Ethan could answer, Zira moved. One moment she was standing still, the next she blurred forward, her blade flashing in the dim light. Her strike was aimed at the nearest pirate, cutting his weapon in half before he could fire. The second pirate swung a heavy club at her head, but she ducked under it, her silver markings glowing faintly as she spun and kicked his legs out from under him. Ethan fired at the third pirate, his shot grazing the alien's shoulder and making him stumble back. The cramped space made every movement risky. One wrong step and they'd both be trapped. The leader roared and swung his massive arm at Ethan. Ethan ducked and fired again, this time hitting the breathing mask. Sparks flew, and the leader staggered, gasping for air. Zira didn't waste the opening. She leapt onto his chest, driving her blade just below his collarbone. The alien dropped to his knees, growling in pain before collapsing to the floor. Silence filled the pod except for their heavy breathing. Zira glanced at Ethan, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Not bad for someone who breathes too much." Ethan gave her a half smile. "You're welcome." They stripped the pirates of their weapons and supplies, finding a small datapad with a navigation route. The route led to the pirates' own small ship, docked nearby. "It's functional," Zira said after scanning the pad. "And it's better than rotting in this pod." They moved quickly, slipping through the docking connection into the pirate ship. The interior smelled of oil and old blood, but the systems were intact. Ethan took the pilot's seat while Zira secured the hatch. The ship's engines rumbled to life, and for the first time in hours, they had control. As they pulled away from the dead pod, Zira settled into the co-pilot's seat, watching Ethan's hands on the controls. "You've done this before," she said, not as a question but as an observation. "Piloting?" Ethan asked, glancing at her. "Stealing ships," she replied with a sly smile. Ethan chuckled. "Only when I have to." They set a course away from the debris field, but Zira's expression remained tense. "You realize pirates always travel in packs," she said quietly. "If these 3 didn't report in, others will come looking." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we need to move fast." An alarm suddenly blared, a proximity warning. On the scanner, 3 blips appeared, closing in quickly. Zira's hand went to her blade, even though the threat was still in space. "They found us," she said, her voice calm but sharp. Ethan's fingers flew across the controls, diverting power to the engines. The stolen ship groaned as it pushed to maximum speed, weaving between chunks of drifting metal from the station's wreckage. Blaster fire lit up the blackness behind them, streaks of red and blue cutting across the void. Ethan jerked the controls, rolling the ship to avoid the shots. Zira gripped the seat, her eyes fixed on the enemy ships. "They're faster than us," she said. "We can't outrun them forever." Ethan scanned the area, spotting a dense asteroid field ahead. "We don't have to," he said. "We just need to make it in there." The moment they entered the asteroid field, the chase turned deadly. Rocks the size of buildings spun in every direction, shadows swallowing light. Ethan maneuvered with precise control, slipping between massive stones as blaster bolts slammed into rock instead of their hull. One of the pursuing ships clipped an asteroid and exploded in a brief flash of fire. Zira glanced at him, her smirk returning for just a second. "Maybe you are big enough to handle this." Ethan shot her a quick grin. "Told you." The 2 remaining pirate ships followed them deeper into the field. Ethan dipped the stolen ship low, hugging the shadow of a rotating boulder. When the pirates passed above, Zira triggered the rear blaster cannons, hitting one ship's engine. It spun out of control, smashing into another asteroid in a burst of flame. The last pirate ship broke off. Deciding the chase wasn't worth it, silence filled the cockpit, and Ethan let out a long breath. Zira leaned back in her seat, eyeing him in a new way. "I thought you were just a slow-breathing human," she said. "Turns out you're a pilot worth keeping alive." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Keeping alive? That's the nicest thing you've said to me." She looked away toward the stars, but there was a faint smile on her lips. "We're not safe yet," she said. "The ship's fuel is low, and without a clear navigation map, we could drift." "For weeks," Ethan nodded. "Then we find somewhere to land before that happens." On the scanner, a small moon appeared within reach. It had an atmosphere and faint signs of vegetation. It was risky, but it was better than floating. Zira glanced at the readings, then at Ethan. "If we crash, it's your fault," Ethan grinned. "Deal," and angled the ship toward the moon. Outside, the silver-gray surface of the moon grew larger. The ship rattled as they entered its thin atmosphere. Neither of them noticed the shadow that moved across the stars behind them, something far bigger than a pirate ship, watching silently from a distance. The stolen pirate ship shook violently as it sliced through the last edge of the asteroid field. Rocks scraped against the hull with metallic groans, and warning lights flashed across the control panel. Ethan gritted his teeth, fighting the controls as if the ship itself wanted to spin out of his hands. Beside him, Zira's fingers danced over auxiliary systems, rerouting what little power they had left. "We've lost stabilizers," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "One more hit and we'll start tumbling." Ethan didn't look at her, eyes locked on the flickering navigation screen. "Then we make sure there isn't one more hit." The moon loomed larger ahead, a pale silver-gray world with faint swirls of green. Its surface shimmered under the weak light of a distant sun. "This place looks dead," Ethan muttered. Zira's amber eyes narrowed. "Don't be so sure. Some of the deadliest worlds look quiet from above." As they dipped lower, turbulence slammed the ship sideways, throwing them against their harnesses. An alarm screamed, and the fuel gauge dropped into the red. "We're going down whether we like it or not," Ethan said, wrestling the controls. "Then land us where we can hide," Zira replied, gripping her seat. The ship roared through the thin atmosphere, a trail of smoke marking their descent. Ethan spotted a dark patch of dense forest near the edge of a rocky cliff. If they could land there, the trees might hide them from any pirate scans. He angled the ship down, but a sudden crosswind slammed into them. The nose dipped sharply, and the ground rushed toward them. "Hold on!" Ethan shouted, pulling back with all his strength. The ship slammed into the forest canopy, branches snapping against the hull. With a final jolt, they skidded to a stop in a clearing, the engines coughing out their last breath. For a moment, neither of them moved, just listening to the creak of cooling metal and the distant calls of alien wildlife. Ethan unbuckled himself, wincing at a bruise forming on his shoulder. Zira was already up, scanning the tree line with sharp eyes, blade in hand. "You crash loud enough to wake the dead," she said, though her lips twitched with something close to amusement. "And you're welcome for landing us alive," Ethan shot back, stepping onto the damp forest floor. The air was thick and smelled faintly metallic. Giant leaves drooped overhead, dripping with pale blue moisture. Strange insect-like creatures clicked in the underbrush, and a shadow darted between two massive roots. Zira crouched low, sniffing the air like a predator. "There's something out there, watching us," she said quietly. Ethan grabbed a small pack of supplies from the wreck and slung it over his shoulder. "If there's something watching, let's make sure we're the scarier ones," he said. She gave him a look, part amused, part evaluating, as if she was still deciding what kind of man he truly was. They set up a small camp in the shadow of the ship. Ethan worked on salvaging parts to repair the cum device. Zira disappeared into the forest, returning with a bundle of strange fruit and long, wriggling insect-like things. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Dinner? She tossed one at him. Try it, human, or starve. Reluctantly, Ethan bit into the strange fruit, surprised at its sweet, citrus-like taste. Zira watched him with a faint smirk. See? Not everything on a strange world will kill you, he swallowed. That's comforting. Coming from someone who probably eats her enemies. Her smirk widened, but she didn't deny it. Night fell quickly, and the forest changed. The air grew colder, and glowing moth-like creatures drifted between the trees, casting ghostly light. Somewhere far off, a deep, rumbling roar echoed. Ethan checked the blaster at his side, while Zira crouched beside the fire, her gaze fixed outward. You really think pirates will come this far to find us? Ethan asked. They're not the only danger, she replied. This moon isn't on most charts for a reason. Creatures here hunt anything warm-blooded, including us. Ethan gave a short laugh. Great, so we're the midnight snack. Her eyes flicked to him, serious now. Not if I'm here, for the first time. He saw something in her expression. Not just the pride of a warrior, but something protective. It caught him off guard. He was about to say something when a sharp crack came from the tree line. Zira was on her feet instantly, blade ready. A shadow moved just beyond the glow of the fire, tall and slow, its eyes faintly reflecting the light. The thing stepped closer, revealing long clawed arms and a mouth lined with jagged teeth. It let out a hiss that made the air feel colder. Ethan aimed his blaster, but Zira raised a hand. Wait! It's not attacking yet. The creature tilted its head, studying them, then took one step into the light. Its body was covered in deep scars, one leg dragging slightly. It was injured. Zira lowered her weapon just a fraction. This one. It's been in battles before, she murmured. It's testing us, Ethan frowned. Testing us for what? The creature let out another hiss, not aggressive this time, but almost warning. Then it turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving the fire crackling in uneasy silence. Zira didn't sit again. Whatever scared that thing is still out there, she said. Ethan stared into the darkness, the hairs on his neck rising. Somewhere far beyond the trees, an even deeper roar rolled through the forest. Closer this time, the night on the moon felt endless. The fire crackled weakly, casting long shadows across the twisted trees. Ethan sat with his back against the wrecked ship, blaster in hand, eyes scanning the darkness. Zira moved silently around the clearing, her blade ready, her senses sharp. That roar they'd heard earlier still echoed in Ethan's head. It was deeper than any predator he'd encountered before. What kind of thing makes a sound like that? He asked quietly. Zira didn't look at him. Something that owns this forest, she replied. And something that doesn't like strangers. The wind shifted, carrying a strange smell, metallic, almost like blood. Zira froze, lifting her head slightly. It's close, she whispered. Ethan tightened his grip on the blaster, his heart thudding in his chest. From the shadows, branches creaked under a heavy weight. Two glowing eyes appeared high above them, watching. A massive creature stepped into the clearing. Its body was covered in dark, scale-like armor, and its head was shaped like a hammerhead shark. Long, clawed limbs dug into the soil as it moved forward. Slow and deliberate, Zira stepped between it and Ethan without hesitation, her blade catching the firelight. "This is mine," she said firmly. Ethan frowned. "We're not doing the hero solo thing, not tonight." The creature roared, the force of it rattling the leaves. It lunged, its claws swiping for Zira. She rolled under the strike, slashing across its leg. The cut was deep, but instead of retreating, the creature grew more furious. Ethan fired his blaster, hitting its side, but the thick scales absorbed most of the shot. The beast swung again, its claw smashing into the ground where Zira had been a moment before. Ethan grabbed a burning log from the fire and hurled it at The creature's face, it flinched, giving Zira the opening she needed to leap onto its back. Her blade stabbed between the plates of its armor, sinking deep. The creature let out a screech, twisting violently, and Zira was thrown off, slamming into a tree. Ethan ran to her side, helping her up. Her breathing was heavy, and a dark bruise was already forming along her ribs. She waved him off. "I'm fine," but winced with every movement. The creature was circling now, its eyes glowing brighter. It was wounded, but not enough to stop. Ethan looked around desperately. If they kept fighting like this, one of them wouldn't survive. His gaze landed on a jagged rock formation near the edge of the clearing, a narrow gap between two boulders. "Zira, get it to follow you into that gap," he shouted. She glanced at him, saw the determination in his eyes, and gave a small nod. She darted toward the rocks, taunting the creature with quick, shallow cuts. It roared and charged after her, claws tearing at the earth. At the last second, Zira slipped through the gap, her small frame fitting easily. The creature tried to follow, but its massive shoulders jammed between the stones. "Now, Ethan," she called. Ethan grabbed one of the heavy branches from the fire and shoved it deep into the gap beside the beast's head. The dry wood ignited instantly, flames licking across the creature's armored hide. It thrashed and roared, unable to pull itself free. Finally, with one last howl, it broke away and vanished into the dark forest, the sound of crashing branches fading into the distance. Ethan dropped the burning branch and slumped against the rocks. Zira stepped out from the shadows, breathing hard but grinning slightly. "Not bad, human," she said. "For someone who supposedly can't keep up," Ethan smirked. "And not bad for someone who teased me about my size." She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Instead, she sat by the fire, pulling off a piece of her armor to inspect the bruise beneath. Ethan handed her a small med pack. "Here, let me." She hesitated, then allowed him to press the healing gel along her ribs. The glow of the fire reflected in her amber eyes as she studied him quietly. "You didn't have to help me like that," she said softly. "Most people would have used the distraction to run." Ethan met her gaze. "I don't leave people behind." For a moment, her usual sharpness faded, replaced by something warmer. "You might be different," she murmured, almost to herself. They sat in silence for a while, the forest strangely calm after the fight. But the peace didn't last. Zira's ears twitched, picking up a faint hum in the distance. "That's not an animal," she said, standing quickly. Ethan listened, hearing it too, the distinct sound of vengeance. They moved to the edge of the clearing, peering through the trees. In the sky above the forest, faint lights moved slowly. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Pirates?" Zira's expression was unreadable. "Maybe," she said, "or something worse." The lights hovered for a moment, then began to descend toward the forest. Ethan tightened his grip on the blaster. Zira looked at him, her smirk returning just slightly. "Well, human, looks like we won't be bored tonight." Asterisk. The lights in the sky grew brighter as the hum of engines filled the forest. Ethan and Zira stayed low in the shadows, watching the descending craft. It wasn't big, more like a scout ship, but the black and red markings on its hull made Zira's eyes narrow. "Blood fangs," she whispered. "The worst kind of pirates." Ethan frowned. "You've fought them before?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, and I survived, which is why they'd like to see me dead." The craft landed in a clearing not far from their camp, its landing struts crushing saplings beneath them. The hiss of hydraulics filled the air as a ramp lowered. 5 figures stepped out, their armor dark and jagged, each carrying weapons that looked older than the stars, but just as deadly. "They're tracking something," Ethan murmured. Zira's eyes shifted to the forest. "Not something." "US." She grabbed his arm, pulling him deeper into the trees. They moved silently, the soft hum of the scout ship's systems fading behind them. But the pirates weren't wandering aimlessly. They were scanning the ground with handheld trackers. Ethan's heart thudded. "They've got our trail." Zira's grip on her blade tightened. Then we'll give them a trail they regret following." They led the pirates in a wide arc away from their wrecked ship. The forest grew darker. The ground uneven, twisted roots snagging at their boots. Every so often, a branch would snap somewhere behind them, and they'd catch a glimpse of red eyes in the dark. The blood fangs moved like predators, patient, confident. Knowing their prey had nowhere to run, suddenly, one of the pirates broke off from the group, moving ahead to cut them off. Zira saw it first, shoving Ethan behind a fallen tree. She moved fast, catching the pirate by surprise. Her blade flashed. Once, clean and precise, and the body fell silently into the moss. Ethan's eyes widened. "You don't hesitate, do you?" She looked at him, breathing hard. Not when survival is the choice. The rest of the pirates were closing in, their voices low and in a language Ethan didn't understand. Zira's eyes scanned the trees, then she pointed to a cluster of massive vines hanging from a high branch. "Climb," she ordered. Ethan hesitated. "What about you?" Her smirk was faint but there. "I'm smaller, I'll disappear. You?" "Not so much." They climbed into the thick canopy just as the pirates entered the area. From their vantage point, Ethan could see the blood fangs searching below, weapons ready. One pirate paused directly under their hiding spot. Ethan held his breath, praying the branch wouldn't creak. Then without warning, a deep, guttural roar echoed through the forest. The same beast they had fought earlier. The pirates spun toward the sound, raising their weapons. Zira's eyes locked on Ethan's, and in that moment, they both knew they had to move now. They climbed down the opposite side of the tree, landing softly on the forest floor. But before they could get far, the roar came again, this time much closer. The beast burst through the trees, its massive body slamming into one of the pirates and crushing him instantly. Chaos erupted, the blood fangs firing wildly, the beast roaring in fury. Ethan grabbed Zira's wrist, pulling her toward safety. But she twisted free. One of the pirates had aimed at Ethan's back, and without thinking, Zira threw herself into the line of fire. The shot grazed her side, the heat of it burning through armor and flesh. She staggered but stayed on her feet, cutting down the attacker with one swift strike. "Zira!" Ethan caught her as she stumbled, the smell of burnt cloth and blood filling the air. Her breathing was sharp, her face pale. "Keep moving," she hissed. He shook his head. "Not without you." Another pirate shouted, and the beast turned its glowing eyes toward them. There was no time to argue. Ethan half lifted, half dragged Zira through the undergrowth, his muscles burning. They reached a narrow cave opening in the side of a rocky cliff and slipped inside. The entrance was just small enough to hide them from sight. Outside, the beast tore into the remaining pirates, its roars echoing into the night. Inside the cave, Ethan lowered Zira gently onto the ground. Her armor was scorched, the wound deep but not fatal. He ripped open the med pack, hands moving fast. She winced but didn't push him away. "You risked yourself for me," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. Ethan met her gaze. "You did the same for me first." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. No teasing, no smirks, just an unspoken understanding. Zira reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek. "You're not small at all," she said softly. He gave a faint smile. "Took you long enough to notice." Outside, the sounds of the fight faded into silence. The beast had either won or moved on, and the night grew still again. Ethan adjusted the med. Wrap around Zira's side, his hand steady. She didn't take her eyes off him, and for the first time, the distance between them felt different. The firelight from their small torch flickered against the cave walls. Zira's amber eyes softened. In the glow, "Whatever happens tomorrow, we fight together," she said. Ethan nodded. "Together, somewhere far above." Engines rumbled again, not the blood fangs this time, but something larger. They both turned their heads toward the sound. Rescue or a new threat? They didn't know yet, but after tonight, they were no longer just two survivors. They were a team. **. The The deep rumble of engines above the forest grew louder. Ethan and Zira stepped out of the cave, their eyes scanning the night sky through the gaps in the treetops. A massive ship descended, sleek, silver, and unlike any pirate craft Ethan had seen. Zira's eyes narrowed in recognition. "That's a Varelian royal carrier," she said slowly. Ethan looked at her. "Your people?" She nodded once, but her expression wasn't relief, it was caution. The carrier's landing thrusters shook the ground, sending loose leaves swirling around them. A ramp lowered, and a squad of tall Varelian warriors in ceremonial armor marched. Down, their leader, a stern female with markings similar to Zira's, stopped a few feet away. Her gaze sharp. "Zira Varelian," she said. "You are alive." Against all odds, Zira stepped forward, standing tall despite the bandage around her ribs. "I am," she replied evenly, "and I am not alone." The leader's eyes flicked to Ethan, her lips curling slightly. "You bring a human into Varelian lands?" She said with clear disdain. "Why?" Ethan felt the weight of their stares, but Zira didn't flinch. "Because he saved my life," she said, her voice steady. The leader's brow furrowed. "And you saved his?" "Yes," Zira replied. "We fought together, we survived." Together, there was a long silence, the forest still around them. Finally, the leader spoke again. "You know the law, Zira. Life bond is sacred, rare, and irreversible. Are you claiming this human as your bondmate?" Ethan's breath caught, his mind racing. Bondmate. Even without knowing the full details, the word sounded permanent. Zira didn't hesitate. "Yes." The leader's eyes widened slightly, as did the other warriors. Ethan stared at her. "Zira, you don't have to." She turned to him, cutting him off. "I do," she said firmly. "Because size doesn't matter, speed doesn't matter. What matters is heart. And yours is bigger than any warrior I've ever met." The leader's face hardened. "You understand the risk. Bringing a human into our ranks will be seen as weakness by many." Zira's smirk returned, sharp and unyielding. "Then they can try to prove me wrong." One of the younger warriors stepped forward, glaring at Ethan. "If he's truly worthy, let him prove it now," the warrior said, tossing a long spear. To the ground, Zira's eyes narrowed. "This isn't necessary." But Ethan bent down, picked up the spear, and met the young warrior's gaze. "No problem," he said quietly. The challenge was quick, a test of skill, not a fight to the death. The warrior lunged first, striking fast, but Ethan sidestepped, using the spear's length to keep the other off balance. He remembered every move Zira had shown him over the last days, her footwork, her timing, and he used them. Within seconds, he had the warrior pinned against a tree, the spear tip at his throat. The forest went silent again, except for the sound of the young warrior's breathing. Ethan stepped back, lowering the weapon without smugness. Zira's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, pride glowing in her eyes. The leader finally nodded. "Then it is done. The human stands." She turned to Zira. "Your bond is recognized." Ethan blinked, still processing the weight of what had just happened. "Wait," he said. "Does this mean—" Zira stepped closer, interrupting him with a grin. "It means you're mine," she said simply, her voice low and certain. The Varelian warriors moved to secure the area, scanning for any remaining pirates. The royal carrier's lights bathed the clearing in silver glow. Zira reached out, resting a hand on Ethan's chest. "When I first saw you," she said softly, "I thought you were small, slow, fragile. But you've been bigger than anyone when it mattered." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess I proved you wrong." Her smirk deepened. Completely, they boarded the carrier together, the ramp closing behind them. Inside, the halls were tall and gleaming, the air thick with the scent of polished metal and strange herbs. Ethan kept pace beside Zira, ignoring the curious stares from the other warriors. In her people's eyes, he was still an outsider, but in hers, he was already something far more. As the carrier lifted off, leaving the dangerous moon far below, Ethan looked out at the stars. For days, they had been running, fighting, surviving. Now, for the first time, he felt the pull of a future. Zira stood beside him, her hand brushing his just enough to let him know it wasn't by accident. She didn't look at him when she spoke, her voice calm but warm. In my galaxy, there are thousands of warriors, but only one human who could stand where you're standing. Ethan glanced at her. And you chose me. Zira finally looked at him, her amber eyes glowing. I didn't choose you, human. I recognized you. The stars stretched endlessly ahead. The tiny warrior who once mocked him now stood at his side. And Ethan realized that on this journey through the unknown, he was no longer just surviving. He was exactly where he was meant to be, with her.